At the New Year's countdown, my grandson grabbed the mic to claim my house and my boat for the family brand. The pier went silent. I didn't argue. I opened a fireproof envelope and a chart tube I'd stowed beneath the nav table. One deed, one trust, one harbor restriction. The truth landed harder than midnight. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. It helps more than you think. The marina does New Year's the way old sailors prefer things. Slightly out of tune, entirely sincere. Diesel ghosts mix with brass notes, thermoses pass like flares, and even the impatient agree to let time tick in public for once. The Marigold sat in slip C12 with the posture of an old friend who doesn't stand to greet you because the friendship is proven. Teak gone honest gray, lines coiled right-handed because that's how a life of knots trained my wrists. Canvas snugged for weather that pretends to be kind until it turns childish and mean. Tyler asked to meet there, my grandson, 22, with a blazer the color of new money and a jaw set for announcements. "Let's ring in the year where you taught me bowlines," he'd texted, and a sailor always gives a boy a chance to tie a better knot. By 1150, the dock had formed little flotillas of families and strays. Couples with paper cups of champagne that sweated in the wind, kids with sparklers drawing constellations the water erased as soon as it recognized them, men who can still coil a hose correctly, pretending not to judge those who can't. The band leader tapped his watch. The dockmaster, Helen, who once piloted a tug through a fog so thick we blessed her with coffee and a plaque, stood with the handheld radio that can settle disputes faster than scripture. "Granddad," Tyler said, touching my sleeve, "can I say a few words before the countdown?" He wore nerves under confidence like a cheap liner under a good coat. He asked Helen for the mic. She gave it. People who run harbors respect a man who asks permission out loud. He smiled at the crowd. "Happy almost New Year. Quick update. This year, I'll be taking over the Hart property, the Harbor Street house, and the Marigold, so my grandfather can finally relax. We'll modernize, list the house during renovations, and open the boat for charters. Time to monetize legacy and get her working for the family." The word monetize hit the planks with the slippery clank of dropped hardware. Conversations hiccuped. Someone said, "Oh," in the voice we save for weddings when the best man goes off script. My son looked at his shoes. My daughter-in-law smiled the way women smile when they've already had this fight and lost the appetite to win it in public. Helen's eyes found mine. The band forgot what number comes after 11. I didn't take the microphone. I stepped aboard the Marigold, ducked into the cabin, and slid the latch on the nav table where a fireproof envelope waited beside the charts. A sailor reads barometers of air and of people. The low had been falling all week. Back on the dock, I set a weathered chart tube across 2 dock boxes and laid the envelope beside it. "Just 2 clarifications," I said, loud enough for the front row, calm enough to let the back rows hush one another. I opened the envelope with the care you give a compass you trust more than men. 2 documents slid into the light like fish that have decided to be caught. A recorded deed into a trust and a notarized life estate. "This," I said, tapping the deed, "puts the Harbor Street house in a trust 3 winters ago. Trustee is Ms. Alvarez. Some of you pay her to keep your paperwork from drowning. I kept a life estate. Translation: I live there until I choose not to, and no one lists anything without my signature." A small wind of relief moved through the dock. People who love order exhale when paper speaks. And this, I said, uncapping the chart tube and drawing out the Coast Guard documentation, is the Marigold's title and a restriction recorded with Helen's office. No charters without the owner's written consent. The owner's name is mine, not a brand, not a hashtag. Permission isn't inherited. It's granted. Aye, Helen said, not taking the mic. On file. Tyler's smile flickered. He tried the language of care. I just want you to rest, Granddad. Enjoy your years. Let me handle the hard parts. Rest isn't found in abdication, I said. It's found in arrangement. A sailor rests when the sail is trimmed right, not when he jumps overboard. 10, someone shouted, grateful for math. The crowd took it up, a chorus that forgives no one for missing numbers. 9. Tyler, I said, softer now, for the space between us that used to be made of Legos and is now made of pride, if you want responsibility, you start with watch, not with wheel. 8. I didn't know about the trust, he said, honest at last, because time was stealing options. 7. You didn't ask, I said. You announced. 6. He looked at the crowd, not peering through phones, because Helen bans phones for 5 minutes every December 31st and dares you to fight her. He looked back at me. The boy who loved knots pushed the man who loved headlines out of the way. 5. I'm sorry, he said, and it reached me. I wanted to surprise you. 4. You did, I said. Surprise is a poor captain. 3. Make a better announcement, I added, and offered him the mic because forgiveness without a job is sentiment. 2. He took it. Correction, he said, voice steady, spine learning. I don't own anything I didn't buy or build. I'll learn the trust, the logs, and the rules. If you see me on the Marigold, it's with permission. If you see me at the house, it's because I knocked. Happy New Year. 1. Midnight arrived with horns and relief. The band remembered a song everyone knows when they stop trying to be special. Strangers clapped the way people clap when a collision is avoided by inches and paperwork. Helen poured me coffee that tasted like a medal and handed it over without ceremony. Tyler threaded through apologies like a tender through a crowded mooring field, slow, with eyes up, ready to correct. When he climbed aboard, he sat by the primary winch and looked at the papers I was sliding back into the envelope. Who's Miss Alvarez? A woman who reads, I said, and who doesn't love you enough to lie. Can I meet her? Monday. Bring a pen. He laughed, and it was the laugh I trust, the one that loosens a jaw. Across the water, the house burned one kitchen light like a lighthouse designed for one man and anyone he invites. The year began with a correction instead of a collision. That's seamanship. The first Monday of the year smelled like brass polish and coffee strong enough to float a bolt. Tyler arrived 5 minutes early with a notebook, 2 pens, and a face that had practiced humility in the mirror. That's a start. He stood at the threshold as if the house might judge him for previous announcements. Houses do judge quietly, with draft and dust. I waved him in. We start with 3 things, I said, setting the fireproof envelope on the kitchen table between placemats that have seen better casseroles. Trust, logs, and rules. If you learn these, you'll never have to grab a microphone again. He cracked the notebook and wrote the words like headings he didn't want to forget. Trust, logs, rules. Trust first, I said, opening the deed in the life estate. This is a revocable trust established 3 winters ago. Trustee, Miss Alvarez. Successor. Trustee, the person whose name is written here, not yours. Beneficiaries, family, named. Life estate retained by me, recorded. Translation: I own the right to live here. The trust owns the title. The trustee acts. You ask. He traced a line with his finger, not touching the ink. Why a trust and not a will? Because probate eats time and privacy, I said, and because I learned on ships to make replacements clear before the sea asks the question. A trust is a standing order. A will is instructions after you've already gone overboard. He nodded, genuinely curious now that the stage was gone. What does the trustee actually do? Keeps the paper honest, pays taxes from the trust account, declines nonsense, and calls me when a beneficiary tries to turn family into free. He winced. Copy that. Logs next, I said, and put the maintenance book on top of the envelope. Every leak, every squeak, every filter change recorded with date, parts, and notes. Boats live because logs exist. Houses live for the same reason. Read last year. He read. January. Replace a node on water heater. February. Clear French drain after heavy rain. March. Roof inspection. No action. April. GFCI outlet replacement in the garage. Tested. May. Trim olives away from the eaves. Tyler promised. June. Repaint handrail. July. AC service. August. Deck screws walking on the south steps. Reset. September. Clean gutters. October. Replace smoke alarm batteries. November. Service the Marigold's diesels. December. Test sump pump. Okay. He stopped at May and looked up. I promised. You did, I said. And I climbed a ladder with knees that mutiny past 10 feet. Modernizing legacy would have impressed me less than trim the olives before they invited termites. Write that down, he wrote. Trim olives, stop termites. Rules, I said, stacking the HOA covenants, the city's short-term rental ordinance, and the harbor's charter policy. He read the HOA's plain-voiced ban on short-term rentals like a man reading a surprise bill. He read the city's requirement for permits even on long-term renovations. He read the harbor's bright sentence, no charter activity from private slips. Why is everything no? He asked, halfway whining, halfway honestly exasperated. Because yes keeps fools alive too long, I said. In seamanship, rules are written in the blood of people who didn't have them yet. In cities, they're written in the frustration of neighbors who did. He smiled despite himself. That's grim. That's maintenance, I said. Now, your watch. My what? You wanted responsibility. You get a watch bill, 4 weeks. Every Monday, you log status checks. Roof line, downspout, sump, GFCIs, water heater anode, crawl space moisture, and olive branches. On the boat, bilge pumps, batteries, lines, seacocks, and diesel sight glasses. You'll send the log to Ms. Alvarez by email. Copy me. If you miss a check, you make it up and bring coffee. He grinned. I can do that. You can, I said, but you have to. We went to the garage. I handed him the headlamp and kept the clipboard. He crawled under the water heater like a new deckhand learning his first valve. That's the anode, I said. You'll replace it in March. If you forget, the water heater remembers by rupturing. He checked the GFCI, clicked, reset, clicked. He wrote. We walked the perimeter and tapped downspouts with a knuckle and a prayer. He saw the place where the French drain had clogged last winter and the mark on the stucco where water had tried to author its own story. Logs beat anecdotes, I said. At the harbor, Helen watched him check the Marigold's bilge pumps and didn't help when he fumbled the battery switch. You don't help a watchstander by finishing his watch, she said from the dock. He looked at her, then at me. Copy that, he said, the phrase finding its correct home. Back at the table, I pulled out the budget and the trust account statements. It costs to keep anything afloat. Houses, boats, families. Here's what the trust paid last year. Here's what I paid. Here are the gaps. Your watch doesn't include money yet. It includes seeing the numbers exist. He ran a finger down the column, swallowing like a man who thought rent was the only bill in the world and has just discovered insurance, taxes, replacement reserves, and the small line item called grace. "Why do you keep so many lists?" he asked, less as a complaint than as a kind of awe. "Because lists keep men from pretending memory is management," I said. "Also because I like crossing things off." We ate soup at the counter because soup forgives in a way bread can't. He asked if Ms. Alvarez would mind his emails. "She'll bless them," I said. "Trustees like evidence." When he left, he stood on the porch the way a man stands before a watch, adjusting nothing, committing everything. "Granddad," he said, "I didn't know I was trying to be captain. I just didn't want to feel like a passenger." "Passengers complain about weather," I said. "Crew put on a jacket." He nodded. "See you next Monday." "See you before if the olive branches touch the eaves," I said, and he laughed, a good sign. After dark, the house settled with the kind of creaks you get used to when you've promised to hear them. The Marigold's mast ticked twice in the breeze like a clock that refuses to be digital. In the log I wrote, "Assigned watch. Pride redirected into work. Weather holding." Then I turned out the kitchen light, the lighthouse for one, and went to bed, not to sleep like a man without obligations, but to rest like a sailor between checks, content because a list exists and someone besides me plans to read it. The Wednesday squall came fast, as winter tantrums do. Sun at noon, steel by 2, rain at 3 that made gutters talk in tongues. Tyler texted without emojis, which is how you know a boy is learning, on site, starting checks. I watched from the porch as he moved with a list, not with nerves. Crew, not passenger. He began at the downspouts, tapping, listening, clearing the elbow with a gloved hand when the flow went from sulk to song. He noted the French drain, where water had once tried to write its own policy, and raked away the leaves the olive tree had shed like a bored god. At the garage, he tested the GFCI, reset it, then tested it again because the first reset on a wet day is a liar. He climbed to the crawlspace hatch with a headlamp and an opinion. 50 minutes into the squall, he texted, "Crawlspace dry, sump pump humming, olive branches still clear." "Copy," I replied, and discovered the pleasure of letting another man write the line you wanted to read. At the harbor, the Marigold tugged at her lines like a polite dog hearing thunder. Tyler checked chafe gear, added one more rap at the cleat because he's learning redundancy the way a body learns balance. He toggled the bilge auto switch, then forced the manual for a pulse check. Human hands still needed in the age of allegedly smart pumps. He leaned into the wind, checked the mast stays, and for a moment looked like a man he had not yet earned, which is fine. We all rehearse before we perform. Helen watched from the dock with the expression of a woman who allows competence to announce itself. "How's your list?" she asked. "Still learning where to put the commas," he said, grinning. "Commas save ships," she replied, "and marriages." Back home, the power blinked, sighed, then held. The sump ticked on and off like a clock that refuses drama. Tyler arrived soaked and pleased with himself in the way that doesn't ask for applause. He peeled off his jacket on the porch because he has learned that floors keep grudges longer than people. We stood at the kitchen counter for the debrief every watch deserves. "Downspouts cleared," he began, reading from a notebook turned into a life raft. "Crawl space dry, sump operational, GFCI tested. The south steps need new screws. 2 walked up after last summer's heat. Bilge pumps fine. Batteries 92% on the house bank, 87 on the start. Lines retied. For sale cover still good. I left a note for myself to stitch the hem if the wind keeps like this." He looked up. "Did I miss anything?" "Only one," I said, pointing at his boots. "Boat shoes don't go in the house." He laughed and left them by the door where they looked like 2 old dogs sleeping. We ate stew while the gutters bragged. He asked about the trust again, about what happens when the tide takes you, his euphemism for death that I let stand because men need their poetry where terror lives. "When I go," I said, "the house stays in trust. Ms. Alvarez executes what I wrote. The marigold goes to a person who signs a separate paper. I'll show you when you can read it without plotting. Your role can be written. Roles are earned." He didn't flinch. "I'd like a role, not a title." "Roles do things," I said. "Titles announce them." He nodded, serious as a man swearing off certain adjectives. "What's one thing you did wrong when you were my age that you want me to skip?" "Thought stubbornness was seamanship," I said. "It isn't. Seamanship is humility with good checklists." He wrote that down, not to flatter me, but because he wants to remember something that might keep him in a boat alive one day when love is not enough. The rain calmed to embarrassment. We wiped down the porch, the way you pat a dog to reassure yourself as much as the animal. He packed up, then paused at the door. "Granddad," he said, "if I'd asked before the countdown, would you have said no?" "I would have said yes to watch, no to wheel," I said, "and I would have shown you the papers in the kitchen while the band practiced, so we didn't have to rehearse in public." He nodded, a small apology for a specific sin, which is the only kind worth collecting. After he left, I walked to the bedroom and opened the drawer, where I keep letters men don't read until they have to. I added one to the stack, addressed to Tyler, to be delivered by Ms. Alvarez when the tide takes me. It said, "If you're reading this, I trusted you enough to hand you the wheel. Your first act is to read the logs. Your second is to send a copy to Helen. Your third is to forgive yourself fast when you err and fix it faster. Your fourth is to eat. Men crash boats because they're hungry. Don't be romantic. Be fed." The storm moved on to frighten a different county. The marigold settled, lines easing like an old friend adjusting a blanket. I wrote in the house log, "Storm drill successful. Watch performed without theater. Pride replaced with procedure. Recommend promotion to assistant watch with complaint privileges revoked." On the mantel, the New Year's photo, people grinning at a midnight they think they can command, looked suddenly less important than the page in the notebook that said, in a young man's uncertain hand, "Trim olives, stop termites." Civilization advances when someone writes that willingly. I slept the kind of sleep a sailor trusts between bells, light, ready, satisfied, because the list is shorter and the man who shortened it intends to return. By February, the year had calmed into useful weather. Tyler's watch reports landed every Monday like tides, predictable, brief, and increasingly competent. He wasn't performing. He was maintaining. That's how men change without saying they're changing. On a Saturday morning, Ms. Alvarez came by with a folder and a face that doesn't waste time. We'd planned this, a meeting in the kitchen where all our best law has been made, not because oak tables sanctify anything, but because coffee keeps pride from breaking the porcelain. Tyler arrived early, watch notebook in hand. He stood when Ms. Alvarez entered because someone taught him manners, and lately he's decided to use them. "Ma'am," he said. She nodded, accepted coffee, then set out 3 documents. A summary of the trust and life estate we already knew, a memorandum of understanding for Assistant Watch, and a letter sealed in blue. Mr. Hart asked for a way to recognize responsibility without inflating titles, she said. This memorandum records the work Tyler is doing and authorizes him to act within limits. Maintenance under $500, emergency actions per the checklist, communications with contractors, and harbor within assigned tasks. He cannot sell, lease, list, or borrow against anything. He can be useful. Tyler exhaled something I recognized, relief dressed as permission. "I can do that," he said. "You are doing that," I corrected. "Paper is just how we let strangers know." She slid the blue-sealed letter across to me. "And this is yours to read aloud if you wish." I broke the seal. My handwriting, dated last spring, when I'd watched a friend die with his passwords undeclared and his family crying at screens. "Instructions upon the tide taking me," it said at the top, because a sailor is allowed one joke in a serious document. I read, "Trustee to assume control of the Harbor Street house per the trust prepared by Ms. Alvarez. Marigold to pass to Tyler Hart only upon completion of the following: 6 consecutive months of watch reports without dereliction, proof of harbor policy comprehension signed by Helen, completion of Coast Guard safety course, demonstration of docking in crosswind observed by Helen or her designee, and a letter from Ms. Alvarez stating he hasn't tried to be clever with the house. Failing that, the Marigold goes to the person named in Attachment B." Tyler's eyes flicked up at Attachment B. He didn't ask to see it. He's learning. "There's also this," Ms. Alvarez said, producing a short addendum. "Because men become enemies over keys. A duplicate set for Tyler, labeled Watch, opens everything that makes safety possible and nothing that makes mischief easy." We went to the hook by the door, and I hung the keys under the label I'd written that morning. He touched them the way people touch relics, aware of the absurdity, doing it anyway. "Thank you," he said, and the "you" included Ms. Alvarez and Helen and the parts of me that had decided to be a better ancestor while still alive. After the ink dried, we drove to the harbor. Helen met us with a clipboard and a grin that could salt fish. "Pop quiz," she said. "Wind 15 knots cross dock. Show me a departure that doesn't embarrass your grandfather." Tyler had practiced in his head more than on water, which is where most men begin their mistakes. He breathed, cast off stern first, held bow with a spring line, backed against the wind, and slid out like he meant it. He grinned and ruined it by grinning, then recovered, set neutral, and took a breath he had earned. "Again," Helen said, and he did worse, then better. She signed the observed line with a flourish that made the ink laugh. "Don't get cute," she said. "Cute sinks boats." On the dock, an old friend from the yard ambled over. "He yours?" he asked, nodding at Tyler, who was coiling lines the way they prefer, quietly, right-handed, with a little pride at the end. "He's his," I said. "On paper, too." "Paper's what keeps Christmas promises from turning into lawsuits," my friend observed. He spit, missed, and apologized to the sea with a toe scuff that was more prayer than habit. In the afternoon, we walked the house together the way men walk a hull, palming walls, listening. Tyler pointed out hairline cracks he wanted to monitor, places where caulk had surrendered early, the olive branches he intended to trim before Monday to stay ahead of the list rather than letting the list be the thing that makes him feel useful. He asked if we could put a small sign by the breaker panel labeling circuits the way he likes to read, not the way the electrician had guessed. "Make it legible for the man panicking in the dark," I said. He wrote it down. Before dinner, we sat at the table with the trust binder and turned to the final tab, beneficiaries, distributions, the language that turns love into percentages, then back into rent payments and groceries, and the occasional check a grandson writes to a widow, because the trust can be generous when the math allows it. "Who taught you to do all this?" Tyler asked. "The Navy?" "Bills," I said, "and watching good men become bad captains because they never learned to say, 'I don't know. Show me the manual.'" He folded his hands in a way I hadn't seen since he said grace at 6, because he thought it pleased me. "I don't know," he said. "Show me the manual." I pointed to the binder, the log, the harbor rules. "These are the manuals," I said, "and when they fail, you ask Helen, Ms. Alvarez, or me. If we fail, you call the man who fixes pumps and pay him before he has to ask. If you still don't know, stop and sleep on it. At 2 a.m., men crash boats into things they could have missed at 8. He nodded. The keys labeled watch clicked against the table when he moved his hand. Small sound. Big change. That evening, he posted nothing. No photos of the marigold, no "blessed to be trusted" caption. He sent an email to Ms. Alvarez with his watch report, CC'd me, and added one sentence. "Recommendation: add olive trimming to standing orders pre-rain." She replied with a thank you that did not use an exclamation point because professionalism has a grammar. When he left, he knocked the way he promised he would knock if he came by unannounced. I waited until his car turned the corner, then walked to the breaker panel with a Sharpie and a ruler. "Kitchen lights, north," I wrote in neat letters that a man panicking in the dark can read. "Sump pump, do not turn off. Garage GFCI, resets porch." I felt silly, then sainted, in the small way order blesses a house when no one is watching. In the log I wrote, "Transferred what can be transferred without lying. Watch, keys, responsibility, not title. Paper made the promise portable." I put the binder back on the shelf where even grief will know to find it. When I turned off the kitchen light, the house felt less like a fortress and more like a vessel with a crew. The marigold's mast ticked once in approval. The night kept its shape. If you read this far, you don't need a moral, but if you want one, it's simple. Make the transfer while your hands still work. Let the people you love learn watch before they crave wheel. Then write it down so the truth can't be argued with at midnight by a man holding a microphone. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.